What's up, everybody? Reed Wallach back on the early read week 13 best bet show. Going to run through some injury updates, some adds to the card, some player props, some underdog stuff. Usual week 13 show, but I've been liking bringing on a guest to talk through the slate, maybe get some second eyes, third eyes, I guess, on the slate. And to do that this week, longtime listener of the show. It feels weird saying that, but longtime listener, first time guest on the show. It's Andrew Katz at Andrew P. Katz, one of the co-hosts of the Burning the Red Shirt pod. Andrew, appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's been a long time in the coming here.
Yes, certainly, dude. So when for Burning the Red Shirt BTR, if you will, podcast, we don't actually really operate at any sort of cadence. I appreciated how you didn't provide any sort of show sheet or anything. That's how I like to roll. Generally speaking. But for BTR, anyone who listens to our pod knows that there's no show sheet, no regular cadence. But I've been getting the itch lately because of the difficulty or reality that we've had kind of syncing up and doing actual pods for Burning the Red Shirt. I've been getting the itch to go and just talk CFB with different people in their pods that they do. So I feel very fortunate to come on and talk with you, considering the illustrious guests that you've had that I am privileged to follow.
Yeah, well, I'm pumped to have you on. So I guess to kind of set the stage for week 13, we'll go through some injury news. And it's a good thing we're recording on Wednesday because Tuesday night, big news comes down. Ohio State center Seth McLaughlin, torn Achilles in practice. Obviously, the biggest game on the card this Saturday is Ohio State, Indiana, that top 5 matchup in Columbus. So, Andrew, I guess let's start with the game handicap, and then we could weave in the McLaughlin injury. This is now a third starter for the Buckeyes on the offensive line. We can maybe talk some big picture Buckeyes. But where were you at with this game? Does the McLaughlin injury change your handicap of the game, or is this more just kind of in the subplot of the game, something to keep an eye on?
So I'll talk to it primarily through the selfish angles that I have associated with that game and whatnot. I talk CFB. I have my hands in lots of different cookie jars, like lots of different chats and whatever. And one of the futures chats that I'm in, one of the guys there put me on to Indiana at 40-1 to make the Big Ten title game months ago. Mm-hmm. So I've been enjoying that and riding it out with the idea ultimately that hey, if it gets to this point, which it has, maybe there's a live money line hedge on Ohio State that I can do in the moment. I don't know if Indiana can actually win this game. I would love them to. It feels really tough. This injury, though, Ohio State, for the vast majority of the season, I would say things just haven't seemed like they've come very easily play to play for them. Given the talent, given the Chip Kelly, what we've seen from him from a play calling perspective historically, I expect them to line up and just be able to do what they want from a success rate perspective down to down. But things don't feel like they come very easily for them for most of the season. Results have been a little better of late, right? I think that they looked pretty good moving the ball and doing what they wanted to against Penn State to some degree. And then I don't know if we really should care too much about the Purdue and Northwestern games that followed, but up until the Penn State game, things just looked very difficult for them. And when I see this injury, I don't know if you wanted me to get into props right off the bat this quickly, but
yeah,
to me, it makes me think about why should I consider Travion and Quinshon unders, and maybe things skew even more passing heavy for them. Running the ball, for most of the season, the way that their games have seemed like they've played out to me is try to run the ball on early downs. It doesn't work that great. They're in third to medium, third to long, and they let the aliens that they have a wide receiver bail them out with a long pass play, right? Maybe we see even things skew even more like that in this game with McLaughlin out. I don't know how they're going to be able to run the ball considering what their own line looks like. I generally when I consume podcasts, I am consuming a lot of stuff that is very focused on fantasy and betting and stuff like that. But one of the pods that I do listen to more for therapeutic purposes because these people make me feel a little less crazy is have you ever listened to High Street Freaks?
I am not.
Ohio State podcast that Meet at Midfield puts out. It's they're lunatics. They're like part of the Ohio State contingent that wants Ryan Day gone for like going back years from now. But they get very into the weeds with respect to like how like the O-line decisions go in terms of like how this was put together from a like just a talent perspective and like game to game preparation, stuff like that. How like things are just they're not setting themselves up for success with the O-line decision making. And now like I don't even know. I can't even imagine what they're saying with McLaughlin going down. Like this could be a total disaster, I think, from a rushing perspective. I don't know what's going to look like but like, I don't know. I can't imagine that things skew more run heavy with McLaughlin going down.
Yeah, I was going through McLaughlin's PFF, much better in pass protection than run protection. So
Okay.
I don't even know if the drop off will be that much. I agree with you though. One prop I did look for in this game, if you want to hear my thoughts on IU versus Ohio State, you could go back and listen to the early week show with Peanut Butter. But what I thought was, I wonder if there's a dam that's going to break where Indiana doesn't have the high end talent that Ohio State does. And I agree with your points overall, but I just wonder if like this game in particular, if the McLaughlin injury matters, whereas when we get to the CFP or the Big Ten championship game, that's where I could see it really starting to factor in. So a prop I was looking at in this game, Emeka Egbuka, I guess this kind of goes, Andrew, with what you were saying, but Egbuka, few down performances, but I think this matchup, and maybe now, as you were noting with the injuries on the offensive line, this could be a good matchup to get the passing game going. And someone like Egbuka, who's been deployed really in those more higher leverage games and earlier in the season. So Indiana runs almost mainly zone, about like 70 to 75% zone. Egbuka, team high 40 targets against zone. It seems like what it's been is Jeremiah Smith is the man beater. Egbuka is the more safety valve, more safety blanket type idea. So Egbuka against zone this year, 30 catches on 40 targets, averaging about 2.4 yards per route run. That's a crazy high number. Only 50 and a half. I mean, one chunk play, you need 3 catches, right? 17 a pop. 3 catches, you're over this number. So I was looking at Egbuka, maybe a buy low opportunity. I know Carnell Tate has come on. Ennis has started to be more involved, but I still think Egbuka, when you're in a game like this, I feel like you got to go to your horses. And Egbuka and Smith are still the horses, in my opinion. What do you think about that?
So that is, I'll answer your question and then pivot back to get zoom out a little bit. That is what's the right word? An angle that I do like to play. Kind of the idea that in bigger games, teams incorporate their stud players a little more. That is one of the rare angles that I will look to from the perspective of like taking an over. Most of, at least, I need to go back and look at the like spreadsheet in aggregate at the end of the season and see what it looks like of like the over 1,000 props I played at this point. But I would guess at least 75% of what I take are under.
That's interesting, because this is my sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah,
this is my first year really diving into props. They were more kind of like very, very specific, but now it's kind of like a routine of mine. I'm mainly overs.
It is a mindset, a shifting of the paradigm of your mindset in terms of what you look for, and your overall approach. Like if you backtest analysis, backtest results and stuff like that, I would be shocked if you didn't see that from a performance perspective, where you're making money is at over a larger sample size, the taking under bets.
Interesting.
But just from a mental mindset, a preparation perspective, what you're looking for pre-release, and then seeing what things look like as props get released, like gearing your mindset to looking for angles that are more geared toward unders, like that. It is something that takes a conscious effort to do, to like gear yourself for that mindset.
I think, and now that you're saying it, as the season's gone on, I've had a lot of perceived edges, like where I kind of think early in the week, okay, here's where I'm looking at props, whether they're overs or unders. I guess in this case, overs. And I'm saying, okay, I want like these guys over this number. The number has gotten much sharper as the year has gone on. Whereas like early in the season, where a guy in the weeds like myself, I could see like, okay, well, like this is just way off. There's no way they know that this guy is like really getting 3x the production that this number implies. It's just, but as the season goes on, you get those data points. You start to see the Like DJ Giddens early in the season was in like the 70s. Like he's getting 100 yards. He just is. That's how this, plus you got a good matchup. He's going to run for 100 yards. He's getting 15, 20 carries. Now he's 98.5 and defense are loading up and Dylan Edwards now is in the mix. So guys that I was maybe playing on overs, I have had to shift away and kind of look like, all right, well, to me, where I've found more success is who's like the third receiver that is in a good matchup, or like the second running back is in a good matchup or something like that. Whereas maybe that is because I haven't been looking at unders as much. Maybe that's kind of the shift in my analysis. Okay, I want an over, but maybe I can't go to the first option.
With respect to the season-long progression, so my approach is not very data-driven. I do very little from like an actual data perspective outside of I have one of my buddies pull PFF snap counts for me, and that is like very important, right, in terms of like trying to potentially identify either guys who are jumping up in terms of like how incorporated they are in the game plan, or even better, the opposite. But outside of that, like my approach is not extremely data driven. It's kind of more feel in nature, but that the edges that come associated with that, like information edges, if you will, like that, those wean away as the season goes on, right? The books, like the data becomes more, it becomes more robust, and books get a better handle on what they're doing, and just the edges generally dry up. Like last week, I had my worst prop betting week in a couple of years.
It's good to bring you on then.
Yeah,
that's I love it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Boomerang effect here.
I don't think it'll happen 2 weeks in a row, but still, like my results year over year, like it definitely, like as the season inches toward this close of the regular season, things definitely get like the edges just dry up. But then we get bowl season and they're all back, right? Because no one knows anything.
Season that's the best. Shout out Ja'Cory Brown in the Pinstripe Bowl last year. But anyway, let's get back to some of the news and notes that I had going into this week. So an interesting game that I think like this is like, to me, the state of college football betting. And I know, Andrew, you're not as much like betting driven, but I'm sure that you're well in tune with it. Virginia was one where I think a few years ago, you would get them at a huge number against SMU as a home dog, and they'd be like right there at the end. Like this would not be a routine victory for SMU. We're inside 10 though. I'm like right at market. So Virginia, they kind of get squashed by Notre Dame. No shame in that, but they bench Calandria. Didn't seem like it was injury driven. I know he's been a little banged up. Tony Muskett comes in. He leads the backdoor cover drive. That's all well and good, but we don't know where this is going to be. Coach Tony Elliott gives like a pretty weird quote about who's going to start. It like might not be Calandria, but it might. Where are you at with this game with SMU now winning in the ACC title game, but a few shaky results on the card lately? You have that close call against Duke. You obviously squashed Pitt, but then I don't know if they were in danger of losing to BC, but Kevin Jennings has some suspect decisions as the season has gone on. Where are you at with, I guess, Virginia, SMU, if you want to take it in another direction based off that? But any thoughts there on even if there's a drop off from Calandria to Muskett?
So Muskett is an alum of my alma mater, Monmouth. So as much as like I'm a Calandria fanboy or was coming into the year, just in terms of like it's fun watching that dude ball out, I do have a soft spot for Muskett as well. Virginia, right, buckets into the school from a QB depth chart perspective, where they actually have multiple viable QBs, which like is not a given in the FBS. Even like within the Power Four, it's amazing. I think kind of seeing some schools that just go into a year with like nothing at QB2. I believe Calandria has actually been pulled in 3 of the past 4 games. He did not get pulled in the upset win over Pitt, which I think he actually could have if Holstein didn't get knocked out. Like he was fairly shaky in that game. That was just like a weird, like amazing underfest of a game from a prop perspective. But then going back the previous 2 games, my recollection is he got pulled from both. So his job is certainly not safe. My gut is that he starts this game. I doubt we get anything in the way of props. There does feel like there's a huge amount of variance in terms of how this game could play out. I agree with you in terms of like SMU has looked kind of shaky of late. Like they're still putting up offensive production, but like every game feels like it's close. They're not winning these games going away against teams that like feel fairly inferior in nature. Like, should they really have had that much of a problem with Grayson James led BC, and then I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago going to overtime with Duke when Jennings turned the ball over 6 times? Like,
he went full catatonic. It was insane. It was that game was out of control. I think he had like 4 fourth quarter turnovers, and Duke like missed like a field goal, like a chip shot to win. It was crazy.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's inside 10. What's the line at now?
Took some money this morning. We're 9.5. It bounced down to 8.5. Got bought up at 9.5. So
from a betting perspective, me personally, like I rarely do anything at a team level. It needs to be either information related or like something extreme happening. Like we move from like a QB1 starting to a QB2 who just like can't throw a football type deal, crazy weather related type deal, something like that for me to get involved. But even then, like it's more for like, all right, kind of scratching an itch more than being my bread and butter. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I could feel great about backing SMU just given like what they've been doing game after game recently.
Yeah. So a game I bet on this morning that I want to talk about, I took the points with Minnesota against Penn State. I took the 11.5. I think these two teams profile very similar. Obviously, Penn State's almost like a super powered version of Minnesota in how they want to go about their business. I know Penn State, obviously, like in the playoff discussion, but this number is a bit large where both teams are outside the top 100 in seconds per play. Minnesota off a bye week. I haven't seen anything definitive on Darius Taylor, but I know he's always in and out of the lineup. Obviously, he's their best running back, but Major, I think, would be able to handle the load. I also kind of lean towards Taylor being fine. To me, this looks like something where slow, sluggish, a lot of wasted possessions because Minnesota's defensive line has really shown up this season, and Penn State just rarely has faced an offense with like a decent success rate. Minnesota's top 50 in that. Max Brosmer's actually turned out to be okay all season long. I think he's gotten better as the year has gone on. So I think Minnesota could lean on the field position battle. This game kind of tighter. Maybe the score is tighter than the actual feel of the game. But I think this is like going to be a real rock fight here. Total's only 45.5. So I grabbed the points with Minnesota. Also, like just objectively, like if you want to go through like where were the close, like efficient market theory, right? Like, okay, a few weeks ago, Penn State was 6.5 at Wisconsin. And I know Penn State ended up covering and they probably should have won by a lot more. And they've been kind of bludgeoning these teams. But like, I think Minnesota is one of the few teams on Penn State's schedule this year that has a blend of a solid defense that limits explosives and an ability to stay ahead of schedule with their own run game. And I think Minnesota is like kind of the perfect recipe of a team that can actually be a little sticky to Penn State. So, Andrew, any thoughts there on Penn State, Minnesota?
It does feel like the backing of Minnesota in this game is grabbing some traction within the betting community with better or for worse. I haven't seen anything that in terms of Darius Taylor potentially missing the game. I know that he's kind of just always banged up and stuff like that. Not that it truly means anything, but he does have props pretty widely posted.
Oh, so then he's fine.
So I would assume he's fine, but like we see props get posted all the time that don't necessarily that shouldn't be. But I have a question for you. Do you think James Franklin cares more about winning this game or stealing the Mackey Award for his tight end that he insists on giving usage to for no real reason?
Probably a little bit of both, but like I'll answer your question with a question. Is Penn State, because we know James Franklin like typically won to punch in a late one to get a cover and everything, but is Penn State in a world where obviously we could talk about their strength of schedule and we could do the whole college football playoff diatribe, but is Penn State really trying to run it up, or is this let's get to the end here. Let's like try and avoid all costs here. So yes, they can go to Tyler Warren and they could use him as a running back or whatever they're doing. I don't really see Penn State getting a lot of separation. Like, okay, they destroyed Washington in the whiteout game and they got away from Wisconsin, but I got a weird feeling about this one.
Yeah,
And
I
to
hear
answer
it.
your question, I think they need to use Tyler Warren because they lack a elite pass catcher, and that's like part of my issue with Penn State in the CFP conversation is like, man, if they had like a true number one receiver, they would, in my opinion, be like a pretty interesting team moving forward. This team doesn't strike me as one that's really going to bludgeon an opponent that has proven to be, what do you want to call Minnesota? Above average, like solid, middle of the road, those mid type of cliches. Like that's how I view Penn State. But Andrew, where do you want to go on the card? Player prop related, anything that sticks out to you? Anything that's
Let me talk a little bit more and in a not facetious way about that game though, because I
yeah.
think it's interesting from what you said about them not really having number one option. Both the last couple of years, they haven't had that number one option, right? We've seen some hints and flashes, and we thought that this year maybe it would be Harrison Wallace based on the beginning of the year and stuff like that, but it's probably not. So I think that's a fair assessment. Like maybe it's most interesting that like it feels like PJ Fleck as the year is progressing is putting more and more on Max Brosmer's plate for the better, and he's delivering. So props to him, even though he's kind of a weird human being. Like props to him for kind of maybe going a little bit outside of his comfort zone relative to what he's done from a scheme in recent history and just kind of playing to his team's strengths. Who can imagine, right? Imagine doing that as a head football coach. So I am definitely interested to see how this one plays out. I would love for it not just to be Penn State just dog walking them. One, I don't know how you would factor this in from a handicapping perspective, but I would say one of the more potentially interesting components to it is so when Penn State gets a big lead, or like we just have to look back 1 week, right? Last week, what they do? They took Aller out of the game, but they bring in Bo Perbella and let him run the offense. It's kind of like the Texas with Arch Manning thing. Like when they like some teams just like they'll take the air out of the ball and like they'll just like bring QB2 is it kind of a nothing like from a skill perspective. But Penn State has like Perbella. I'm super interested to see what's the deal with him in 2025. Where is he? Like he isn't a powerful four starting quarterback in my opinion. I think you should mold the offense to his strengths for sure. But like I like watching that dude play. But when he's in the game in the third and fourth quarter, if the opportunity allows for it, like what does that mean in terms of the impact relative to the spread and the total and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's possible. I would say like it's going to be crazy low, and it depends if Minnesota could show any sort of pulse on offense. But even like if it's a blowout early, like even like second half over, because Perbula is going to be able to run the offense and not just like hand the ball off 3 times, like maybe keep a few.
Yeah,
that could be a look. But yeah, board's open. Andrew, where do you want to go? What's on your mind?
So my general, I subscribe to the idea from a prop betting perspective that you could catalog it as like spray and pray. Generally speaking, like I bet lots of props every single week, but ultimately, like I've seen it theorized that basically like that methodology makes sense when like you want to be betting larger volume when you feel like you have an edge, which I do, as opposed to just concentrating things down to like a small amount. I think with the idea being kind of similar to like from a game, like a single football game perspective, like when there's a large amount of points scored, the better team's going to win kind of deal, more possessions. So that's kind of how I feel. But to that extent, like they're 2 different games, but I think that's the same kind of thing. 2 props that are kind of calling to me are Alan Bowman passing under and Hudson Card passing under. Both of these guys can't stop getting pulled from their games every week. So like just when I'm like building out a portfolio of props for the week, like I think I want both of those in there because like it doesn't feel to me like we're talking about like a true coin flip. Right? You can win that one multiple different ways. One of like the most likely ways that you win is guy just doesn't finish the game. Like they're both huge dogs. They both have gotten pulled in the second half regularly, and you can win that any number of other ways as well, right? So it's interesting that Gundy, I'm a Mike Gundy truther. Love the dude. from a fantasy perspective and just like in general, like love watching Oklahoma State teams play. I think that one of the things that I always look for from a prop betting fantasy perspective and gravitate toward is like any sort of constants that you can glean year over year, week to week. And like Gundy traditionally, like you can count on him having a legit RB1. You can count on him having a legit WR1 and QB1. And like, you can't say that about most coaches. So just known quantities are like a big thing for me. But it's interesting that he continues to start Alan Bowman. Like, he has job security for days, right? You think maybe they want to start prepping for next year. The true freshman who's the backup now, I can't pronounce his first name. It's like Makalika Smith or something. I was a few drinks in by the time he got into the game a couple weeks ago. But, like, that dude's got some swag. I would like to see him kind of get a real shot at it. But you would think there's a decent chance he gets into the game this week against Texas Tech, where they're pretty big dogs. He has not hit the magic number of 4 games played, which is something you have to be mindful of anytime you see a true freshman or a guy who hasn't redshirt yet, right? I think he's only played 2, so you figure he gets into these last couple of games in all likelihood. So Bowman passing under, it's lined at 249.5. Maybe he hits it if they're in the game, and you figure if they are in the game, he's thrown all over the yard. But there's lots of different ways to win that one. Do you have any thoughts on that game?
Yeah, Texas Tech has been a team that is just up both. I mean, Oklahoma State, you can't seem to find the bottom, but Tech to me is just variance monster. I mean, just up and down. You don't know which team you're going to get. So, I mean, pretty broken game, I think. I mean, Oklahoma State, it's a team that I was high on going into the season, obviously completely cratered. I don't really know why Bowman's still playing. Like, this has become kind of weird. Like, after he came in against BYU and like nearly led the win, I thought that was kind of the last stand, and they were going to, I know Rangel broke his collarbone, I think, but I thought that's when they were going to open it up to the rest of the quarterback room, and they're still trotting this out, and they've been still getting their teeth kicked in. So it's a little strange to me that this is still going on. Like, I don't really think like there's a big, like, he transferred there after like 3 or 4 different schools. I guess the angle is it's Alan Bowman revenge game against his old team, against Texas Tech. So Gundy's going to let him cook for a little bit. I think that Purdue one's a little interesting, though, because I don't think I have the stones to take it, but Michigan State's in a bad way. And I'm not saying Hudson Card's going to go over his passing yard prop, but Sparty laying 2 touchdowns against anybody kind of rubs me the wrong way. So maybe Purdue finds some answers. I'm not saying I'm betting that. I don't know if I can get there, but I mean, both games, I mean, a lot of these games are just becoming just high variance that you just don't really know where the mindset of these teams are.
Speaking of bets that I probably don't have the stones to make, I saw Hudson Card got lined at 3.5 rushing yards. I saw some stat. I forget where I saw it on Twitter who tweeted out, but like Michigan State has like 1 sack in the last 6 games. So when you're betting QB rushing, right?
Yeah. Like
that is, what does the sack total look like? Is like a pretty big factor. Card, my recollection is what he's done from a rushing perspective is outside of sacks has been very variable just based on his health because the dude's always banged up. I don't think I have the stones to take like his rushing over and his passing under with the premise being that he could get pulled before he hits the rushing over. But like both of those kind of stood out to me as interesting.
So this season, includes sacks, but you got going down the line. So I'm not going to repeat the opponent, but you got 3 for 4, 6 for -9. That's carries then yards. 6 for 4, 5 for 5, 7 for -22, 3 for 33, 6 for -42, and 3 for 16. But it's worth noting, obviously sack yards included, but he has a double-digit rush in 1, 2, 3, 4 in 5 of those games, and he's played in 8. So rip off one nice run and hope he doesn't get sacked. Hope he doesn't run backwards at all. That's an interesting one. Speaking of quarterback rush ones, where are you at with Kansas State? I kind of spoke about them like for a second before and anecdotally, but saw a report that Chris Kleiman was talking about the play calling and what happened. And I'm not an Avery Johnson guy at all. I've been kind of banging the drum, and last week we hit that win total under, which is nice. But he is a dynamic rusher, but we've seen as the year has gone on him not run. I believe some of it is attributed to an injury he may or may not have suffered against Colorado a few weeks back. But we have seen him not take off as much as the season has gone on. They've tried to make him like a more of a traditional pocket passer. But Chris Kleiman said, like, we got to let Johnson rip. Like, we got to let him take off. His rushing yard prop is in like the low 40s. Is that something that interests you against a Cincinnati defense that kind of got cooked on the ground by Rocco Beck at different times?
Yeah, so I was on his rushing prop last week, which was infuriating because I thought so that was a lot of fun. 6 for 27, and the prop was I think 39-ish. I am tempted to go back to the well, but just based on coach comments, like we get so much bullshit by fed so much bullshit by coaches that like you got to really be choosy. And I feel like you need a second or third reason to buy into coach commentary a lot of times. I don't think I would bet his under, just based considering this of just trying to make him into a pocket passer doesn't work or doesn't seem like it's working, right? So I would assume, given the latest results, they probably like move away from that premise. I don't know if I play the over this week though, like at a very personal level, just because the wound is still fresh from last week. But that would be my stance. So I wouldn't play his under this week.
Where else you're looking on the card here?
Oh man, so I wonder how so this is actually my birthday weekend, or when will this go live?
This will go live on Thursday.
AM or PM?
AM, first thing.
All right, nice.
In your podcast feed. That's how we do it.
I have a feeling it won't even be available any longer because it's already getting pulled in most places. But if Haynes King passing is still available, the under needs to be hit there.
Okay, you give your handicap and I'll give my little thing.
Yeah. Considering what we saw in the Miami game of like them just crafting this amazing game plan with Aaron Philo, however you pronounce it, and King kind of swapping in and out based on passing/rushing situations as a result of King's shoulder being messed up. I think that they just saw success from this, right? And like shoulder injuries don't feel like a boo-boo where you put a Band-Aid on and it's suddenly better 12 days later. I would guess that we probably see something akin to that again this week. So King getting lined at like a real actual 50th percentile passing prop, like that is an easy take for the under. But again, like who knows if they'll even be there by the time this pod goes live.
Yeah, I like NC State in the game. I think I'm gonna get there on a bet. It's hanging out in a dead zone. It's like 8.5 right now.
Yeah,
I guess like follow me on betstamp if you want to see if it goes through or not. But over a touchdown, NC State's a team that obviously I was high on going into the year, fell way short of that. This is the only Thursday night game. But I just don't know if the difference between these two teams are more than a touchdown. I know Georgia Tech is, last time we saw them, they're off that win, but that's not replicable when you go from like a 10-point dog to a more than a touchdown favorite. And I guess the question is King fully healthy now? Is King back to normal King where they're going to be able to throw it down the field? I don't know. Like, are they really going to run up and get margin here on an NC State team that needs a win to go bowling, has kind of been snake bitten by a few results here that are maybe kind of clouding that the team has been trending up with Bailey? Just not sure I see Georgia Tech running away and hiding here against NC State.
I agree with you. The idea that basically that you replicate that game plan and get.
Not that by the way, they're probably not going to do the same exact game plan like the triple, basically a service academy, but definitely more run heavy.
Yeah. But the idea that you're going to run out these multiple QBs and stuff and get like what must have been like a 95th plus percentile outcome, right, in terms of how things played out on the stat sheet against Miami, like that. If I assume the spread probably doesn't assume that bake in that like they're just going to be we could be juggling quarterbacks all game, or maybe it does. I don't know. But that does feel like, I don't know if the QB room looks like that in terms of both these guys getting snaps intra drive. Like, Kev, would you, if you know that going in, are you really looking to back Georgia Tech? What'd you say? It was like 8.5.
Yeah, over a touchdown.
That's tough.
Yeah. And then one more bet I made, still hanging out there. I don't know if it's really been priced in, but I took the under 45.5 in Iowa, Maryland.
Oh, nice.
It might not be Cade McNamara. It might be the third stringer. I don't trust Maryland at all. I think this and like I know Maryland has some weapons on the outside, but Iowa's defense continues to be a buzzsaw pretty much, and Maryland has no sense of a run game. So I see a lot of failed drives here. I see a lot of punting. I see Iowa leaning on its defense. This has all the makings of 17-13 somebody. So I took the under 45.5, especially. And if it's not McNamara, the third stringer, I know he had like one good pass, but they're only going to be running Caleb Johnson. That's actually the strength of the Maryland defense. The Maryland defense actually grades out pretty nicely against the run. Obviously, it's Iowa away from Kinnick, where you see pretty much a drop off. Maryland is 17th in EPA per rush. So I think running clock in College Park, and we get out of here. So I took under 45.5 as a gross one that I played.
No, that's a cool angle. I like that. Like Jackson Stratton is not going to be able to do anything competent in terms of
the market. Didn't really. Maybe it was really baking it in, but I don't know. I was off a bye last week, so I don't really know if the opener was necessarily shading that way. But the opener at Bookmaker was 45, and it's actually up a tick, which I just like can't get there. So
it's odd to me, just from a historical perspective, how Iowa, it feels like somewhat anecdotally, but box score scouring as well. It feels like Iowa has had problems stopping the pass and just kind of been a pass funnel this year. In the past, that's not really how we think of them, I don't think. So, I mean, Maryland does have they've got solid, better than solid talent at receiver, and Edwards can fling the ball around a little bit. So that's a little scary, but I don't know if news is the right word, but like rumors, whisperings, whatever, about Jackson Stratton potentially starting came out. Like I know some guys who were like, yes, like this makes sense at under 45.5. Yeah. And like traditionally, like how I hinted at previously, like that would be an angle from a team, one of the few angles that I would look to get involved from a team backing perspective or team related perspective. Just something information related. So I could see it.
Yeah. Let's talk some round robin thoughts here, some underdogs. I know, again, Andrew, you're in the fantasy space, but I think you have a good sense of the board and where things could go, maybe leaning into some variance. So it's getting tough to find some big, like some underdogs that really make some sense. So anyone that jumps out to you off the board, like maybe some leaning into some variance, leaning into some motivation factors, anyone jump out to you like live underdogs that can maybe shake up?
I know you're going to love this one because you were talking them up last week and they paid off for you. And then we saw some stuff happen in last week's game that makes this even more appealing. Troy against Louisiana. Dude, Ben
Woldridge, man. Caldwell.
Yeah. Ben Woldridge being out of the year is like that matters to me. Chandler Fields is not a death sentence for like Louisiana being able to move the ball, but like Woldridge is a difference maker, relatively speaking. Like it's always nice when we find a going from QB1 to QB2 like an absolute death sentence. But like Woldridge can win Louisiana games and has this year. Chandler Fields, I think, just doesn't lose you them. And like I expect this to be a close game, just with how Troy has played a lot better recently. Stands to reason that Louisiana probably doesn't play the standard that they have while Woldridge is in the lineup. So let's move those two things together and like see what happens.
Yeah, I totally agree there. This number still hanging out like 10.5. I think this is a Woolridge number. I guess you could maybe like what's the drop off from Woolridge to Fields. I don't think it's crazy like you mentioned. I think it's a little bit, and we'll see. But I completely agree. Also, Louisiana's defense is no good, so I think that Troy could hang around here. A few that jump out to me. Utah at home against Iowa State. I know the scoreboard got a little ugly against Colorado, but this Utah defense continues to be, is it a stretch to say the best in the Big 12? Like they're nationally good. And this Iowa State team just does not pass in the smell test for me. That was far from an impressive win against Cincinnati. Before that, 2 losses. Now they're on the road laying 7.5. Night game nonetheless. This Utah team still seems to be trying, if that makes sense. There's still an incentive for them to go out and play. They were clearly outclassed against Colorado. So I think Utah, low total, 42.5. I think they can hang around, especially because Iowa State can't stop the run, and that's kind of all Utah can do. So Utah was one, and then another one. I think UAB had a big number against Rice. Like high variance. You get the right Blazers on the right night. It's just a big change for Rice to now go from like this big underdog to a big favorite, where UAB, we know that they can play up and down. If you kind of capture the right UAB, I think they could play closer than like a 6.5 point underdog. Any other ones?
That's a good one. The UAB one, like that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Like those teams seem like just of similar quality. With Utah, okay, maybe this week we have somewhat of like a normal lead up with from a quarterback perspective. Like should be Isaac Wilson. I don't know if you followed last week. It seemed like maybe we'd be down to Ferrari time with Luke Botari, but I think it's gonna be Isaac Wilson this week. Nothing seeming to suggest otherwise. And dude, Rice Eccles at night, like a little less challenging this year, but still it's a great home field advantage.
The defense is still legit, though. Like you look at every game, the defense has showed up. That's been their calling card. So why can't they just shorten this game? And this Iowa State team, to me, I was never like that crazy about them. I was like preseason, I was like, I could see it, like if it comes together, but like, is this team like really that good? Like I watched the entire Cincinnati game. I was not impressed, to say the least. Any other one jump out to you?
It pains me to say this because like I love them. I love like backing TCU in fantasy, but
I had Hoover on my team.
Yeah, Savion Williams is hopefully going to win me a bunch of money in underdog best ball tournaments that I'm still in. He's like extremely low. He was extremely low owned and went undrafted in most of them. And I'm in semifinals in all 3 tournaments, which are with a bunch of teams, and I have him on like all my teams. So let's get him all the running back touches, all the receiver touches. Let's fucking do it. But like backing Dykes as a sizable favorite is interesting, right? We saw what happened against Houston earlier this year. It was interesting to see Zona come out of a bye and just outclass Houston this past week. Maybe a little bit of like dead count bounce or whatever, but like I could see that game not being a blowout, and then like maybe it's just a Big 12 shootout where anything can happen.
Yeah, I think I agree. Fading TCU is a big fave. Arizona definitely has the high-end talent to compete as well. Like if like maybe they're trying to close strong. I do think though, like Houston is a team where like you kind of know what it's going to be in the first 10 minutes, where like if they fall behind early, they're not really built to come back. Whereas if like they're in the game, they can maybe like play their style, like that game, like when last week I had them against Arizona. And after they got stopped on that 4th down, I was like, oh, well, they're done now. Like there's no second half comeback with this team. I know they did rally against Kansas State, but against like a high octane offense, I do think Houston can get game scripted out pretty quickly. Just a few more and I haven't even made my round robin yet. So these are more like kind of just like they're on the little notepad here that I've scribbled down. I think Maryland has to be on the sheet, just given what we just mentioned about the state of the quarterback room for Iowa. They have to be a consideration, even though I don't really like love Maryland in general. What was the other? A weird number I don't know what to make of Pitt Louisville. Like a really just strange game. That game could go in a million different directions. If we're talking player props, could be looking at another Ja'Cory Brooks over with Pitt's shaky pass defense. But got Louisville off after they blow that game to Stanford as 20-point favorites. And now they're back home against a Pitt team that maybe the drop off from Holstein to Yarnell like isn't that much. Like it's kind of just the same thing. And Pitt has some game breakers like Desmond Reed, Mumfield. So I think that, again, Louisville is a big favorite, always kind of scares me, and Narduzzi as a big dog always intrigues me. Like getting over a touchdown there, I know it's Louisville after a loss and they're at home, but that game screams like weird things happening all game long.
Yeah, that I'm hoping that game's a shootout from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah.
I have Chris Bell and Ja'Cory Brooks, one or the other on basically all my underdog semifinal teams. And with Isaac Brown being questionable, like I know they were able to just kind of plug and play with the committee last week against Stanford, but I don't put much stock in the Stanford defense. You could definitely given Pitt's tendencies on defensive end, you could see this being like really the Louisville offensive production really funneling to the pass game. I am a Nate Yarnell truther. I like watching him last year.
There are dozens of us.
Exactly. I was bummed to see Holstein win the job. Even before Holstein got hurt, he was starting to look shakier.
Yeah, he hit a wall for sure.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what happens with Yarnell after this year. Pretty sure he still has eligibility, but I don't think that like Holstein being out is a death knell by any means. I know that Yarnell's kind of been hit or miss this year. I'm hopeful that game shoots out. I could see it.
I could see it for sure. Andrew, any other bets you want to share? Anything else you want to grace our listeners with before we get out of here?
Oh, I hinted at it earlier. So tomorrow's my birthday. And hoping for like a big cash on Haynes King passing unders to kick off the birthday weekend. But I'm showing great restraint. And so my wife's birthday is the 23rd on Saturday. So, and then our daughter, when do you think she's born? What's her birthday?
Sunday for sure.
Mine's the 21st. My wife's 23rd. My daughter's the 22nd. So yeah, we go 3 days in a row. So I'll for my birthday, I'll treat myself to some Haynes King passing unders, but then I'm going to ease up for the rest of the weekend. Lighter card for your boy before we move into bowl season kind of. And then like, all right, let's start stacking dub.
Yeah, no, we're going to have you on for bowl season to go through some of the availability reports and talk some props and everything. Before we get out of here, best bets for me from the card. I took Minnesota plus 11.5. I took, what was the other one I took? Oh, Iowa, Maryland under 45.5. And then follow me on betstamp if I end up getting to the window on NC State, Georgia Tech. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew P. Katz and check out his podcast, Burning the Red Shirt, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Reed Wallach. Check out the bets in the early read play tracker on the Google Sheet. Bets in real time on my betstamp at RW33. We'll be back next week. Regular season finale. We'll go through all the situations, all the bowl motivations, all the conference championship scenarios your little heart can desire. Best of luck this weekend. We will see you on